welcome to Wisdom Soup. It's so good to see you guys. I see so many wonderful and familiar faces of people that I have come to love. So good to see you all. So here we are. Let's get a couple people. How do I get everybody in? There we are. So I'm so glad that you guys were able to ignore the fact that I put the 9th on the email that I sent out. I really appreciate that you know me well enough to know that I would put the wrong date and to just trust that it's today. It's always Thursday, second Thursday of the month. So the fact that you are here is it shows just a really wonderful level of familiarity between us. So luckily I had the right date on there once. So okay. So for those of you who have joined us for the first time, hello and welcome. And we still have lots of people joining in. We're going to have a great group together tonight. But so for those of you who are just joining in, my name is Ann Tucker, and this is our community, which we call Wisdom Soup. And we started Wisdom Soup. I think it's been about 5 years ago now. We've been meeting every single month without fail. And we have found an inexhaustible number of woo-woo subjects to talk about. So we never run out of fun in this group. There's always something new to explore or discover. So, and we've talked about everything, and we're always looking for more interesting and fascinating topics too. So, and my theory is if I think it's interesting, you guys probably will too. So we have several joining us today in our group. We have several of our members who have been speakers. We have Michael with us who shared his wisdom about dream interpretation. Jackie has done channeling for us before. Rebecca has talked about walk-ins. So you can tell we literally cover the gamut here. And this group is rich with people who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience themselves. So it really is just as much about each other as it is about the topics that we cover every month. So if this is your first time, welcome. And we are glad you're here. And for those of you who keep coming back, I know why you do, is because it's so much fun. It's so fun. So yeah, it's a great place to find your peeps. So tonight we have joining us the wonderful and amazing Nadia Tarnawsky. And Nadia, she has been on the spiritual path since childhood. So she knows where she's known from the get-go where she was meant to be. And she has been able from the earliest moments of her life, been in contact with compassionate beings on the other side. So she has been able to develop this very, very rich and fluent spiritual understanding. And she is a musician, a beautiful singer, by the way. And that led her to traditional music, which delved into shamanic practices. So this is really sort of the foundation of some of her work in the world. And I would love to, let's go ahead and bring you in. All right. And this is Nadia. So, and I will go ahead and let you speak for yourself, Nadia. Thank you so much. She's going to be speaking with us today about curses, something we don't usually talk about. We sometimes think that it's something of the past, that it's something you read about in stories, in Disney movies, and it's not. So Nadia is going to tell us all about it. So thank you, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love seeing so many people that I know. It's just good to have you here and to feel your positive energy. Because we're talking about a sticky subject, a subject that people can potentially bring their own fear about. The first thing that we're going to do before we even start talking about any of this is that I am going to just ask the Sentinel Angels to create a sphere of truth and compassion and light and protection around us, because we are not summoning anything. We are just talking about this subject because we want to learn more about it. We are not inviting curses in. We're talking about them. So all of that kind of energy and all of that kind of fear can stay outside of our sphere. We are simply learning. So that needs to be established first and foremost, so that we have. And then if there are any disentangled beings or entities or people in our ancestral line who are simply frightened, scared, curious, mischievous, and who might negatively affect our field today, we're just going to simply ask them. There's been a beautiful place prepared for them. We're just going to ask them to exit our sphere. And if you're not sure if I'm talking about you, I am talking about you. I'm just going to ask you to exit our sphere. And if you're still not sure if I'm talking about you, I'm going to ask the compassionate psychopomp beings to compassionately escort you from our sphere of work, just so that we have a clear space to talk about this without any kind of additional stuff mucking up the field, because the field can be mucky enough already without additional stuff. So hopefully that feels a little bit better for everybody. And then if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will do my best to keep track of them. Anne has also promised that she will help me keep track of stuff in the chat. Put your hand up, all the Zoom things, and I will do my best to keep track of everything. So I just want to talk a little bit, talk for the time that we have about, I think kind of if we demystify things and talk about things as they are, it makes them less scary, and then we can talk about how we can deal with them, because curses exist, they're there, and so, what are some best practices for dealing with them? That's the best way to deal with things, really. They show up in every culture, and their curses are essentially energetic artifacts which are meant to affect your actions, your health, your ways of thinking. Some of them are ancestral, and we'll talk about why ancestral curses exist and why they're even there, and they can be passed down through your lineage. We'll talk a little about those. And then curse unraveling can help you be released from those kinds of entanglements, because you don't want to be walking around with that. And then also the thing that we can be responsible for is that we can sometimes curse others without being aware of it. And once it's, I had a great therapist who said, well, once you're aware of something, once it's in your awareness, you can't take that awareness away. So once we become aware of things, then we can be a little bit more cautious of how we use our power and how we use those things. Because, we're all gifted, and, if we're not mindful of our gifts, then we can be kind of like a bull in a china shop a little bit and start knocking things over and being unaware of how those things work. So let's talk about what makes up a curse. Oh my God, what makes up a curse? So, there's a long history of curses, and they show up in different ways. For example, in Roman times, curses were written on lead because lead was cheaper than paper. And because they were written on lead, in archaeological sites, there's history of them. You can find them, and you can say, unfortunately, lots of gladiators were cursed because people bet money on them, and so, like, let's pick some random name, I don't know, Claudius. So let's say Claudius is some really great gladiator, and, he's doing really well in the arena, and you're betting on him. You might want his competitor to do really poorly that day, or you might want Claudius to do poorly because you're betting on somebody against him. So you might get a piece of lead. You might write, I want Claudius to be mortally wounded, or maybe you don't want him to be mortally wounded. I might want him to take, a hit in the arm, and then you would take a giant iron spike. You would take this lead curse, stake it into the wall, and then, that was your curse. You might write it yourself. You might hire a professional curse maker to do it for you. There's, lots of ways that people would do these things. Also, speaking of archaeological digs, some people would do curses on poppets, like they would do little clay dolls. And, you would find, like, there's certain wells in certain cities and towns that are filled with all these little clay dolls. And it was later found that people would, write little curses or instill certain wishes for things to happen to these little clay dolls and then throw them into the well, hoping that somebody's behavior would be modified in some way, because that's basically what a curse is. You're hoping for some kind of behavior modification on whatever you're doing. And curses can happen between individuals, they can happen between social groups, they can happen between governmental agencies. And if you don't think the government is doing curses and involving curse builders, think again. It's something my teacher's very reluctant to talk about, so I can't really tell you much about it, but she just is like, it exists. Just know that it's there and that they're doing it. So if that's one of those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, okay, that can be, that's you're glad that you signed up today to find that out. So just know that it happens. And, you're basically, there's a difference between curses and spells. Sometimes spells you might be wanting something good to happen, like, a love spell. People usually don't do love curses on people. Like, if you want somebody to fall in love with you, that's not necessarily a curse. So curses and spells are different things. Wanting someone to not have any luck with money in their life, that's a curse. That's not a spell, because you want misfortune to happen to them. And they come in various degrees. That one's, okay, we'll take that out. Clear that. I don't want that for anybody in this space. We want everybody to have lovely levels of fortune in this room, in our Zoom space. So clear that out. Curses can be intentional or unintentional, tended or untended. So what do I mean by that? I'm usually better at this now than I used to be, but let's say 15 years ago, before I had more training in this, I'm driving down the street. Some insensitive, unaware person maybe cuts me off, almost hits my car, and I say, "Man, you're such a jerk. I hope you get a flat tire." That's a curse. And it's unintentional. Like, I did not sit around and really think about how I wanted something really horrible to happen to this guy who, cut me off in traffic without even thinking about it. I hoped that he got a flat tire later in the day because he cut me off in traffic. Completely unintentional. What I do now, when that happens, if an unintentional curse like that comes out of my mouth, and I catch myself, if I'm good at it, I'll catch myself and be like, "Oh, scratch that, I didn't mean that, I'm so sorry. I was speaking out of anger. Let's wipe that away." I'm trying to think of ways of saying this without making this happen. Intentional curses. Okay, so let's say 500 years ago, you're the mayor of a town. You're a little bit of a philanderer. You have a wife, but you also have a mistress. Your wife has trouble bearing children. Your mistress does not have trouble bearing children, and she has many, many children, but because your wife is your legal spouse, it's incumbent upon her to have somebody to carry on your line, but she's having trouble doing it. She gets really, really mad at your mistress, and then she decides to curse her. That's an intentional curse. And she might do it herself, and think of ways that she might want to curse the mayor's mistress, whether it's, I hope all of her children are ugly, and I hope that everybody in her ancestral line has ugly children, or I hope that her family, even though she might have many children, I hope they have no money. I hope they're always poor. Those are curses, and those are intentional. That's kind of like what I would call your small garden variety curses. She might not want to do it herself. She might, even though she would still incur bad karma for hiring somebody else to do it, she might go to somebody that she knows is really good at making curses, and go to someone and say, "I know that you're a curse maker. I will pay you X amount of money to curse my husband's mistress because I'm really unhappy with the situation, and she keeps having kids, and I can't have kids, and I want the curse to be the following things." And so that professional curse maker will go ahead and make a curse. She might also say, "I want you to make sure that it's a really good curse, and I want you to check on it every 6 months to make sure it still has all the juice that it needs." That's what I mean by tended or not tended curses. Because sometimes you might just lay the curse once, and then it's done, and nobody looks at it again until you talk to somebody to get the curse unraveled. And then they take a look at it and go, "Okay, what's in this curse? How can we get it undone?" A tended curse, the person who laid it, every few months, every year, on the anniversary that the curse was made, whatever, we'll take a look at how that curse is doing. Does it need more juice? Does it need a little something extra? Is it still as strong as it was when it was first laid? What can we do to make sure that the curse is still as powerful as it needs to be? Are the mistress's kids still ugly? If the curse was, "I want all the kids to be ugly," are the kids ugly? Or if the curse was, "I want the mistress's family to be poor," are they indeed poor? Is there something else that needs to be added to this curse? So that's a tended curse. They'll keep checking on it. And if the professional curse person has an assistant, When they die, they might pass on their little black book to their assistant and say, here are all my tended curses. These are the ones you have to keep checking on and make sure that they're still as powerful as they were when we first laid the curse. It sounds really dark and terrible. In a way it is, because what you're doing is you're ensuring that somebody's abilities continue to be limited over a long period of time, which is unfortunate. So, that leads me back to the question of why do people curse in the first place? There's a lot of reasons why this happens. We're always trying to control an outcome when a curse is laid. It could be revenge. In the story that I made up, there's jealousy involved. You've got the wife and you've got the mistress. The wife is unable to have children. The mistress is. She's jealous of her. There's anger there. There's also a lot of curses that involve weapons. Boy, there are a lot of curses about weapons, about guns not being able to shoot straight, swords that break when they hit another piece of metal, swords that, as soon as they hit human flesh, that wound will never heal. There are all kinds of, there's lots and lots of documentation about weapons having some kind of curse on them in order to make them either more deadly or make them unable to do what they're supposed to do. I remember Jackie, who's here today, and I were talking once about curses, and I said, you ever watch the football game and you see that ball and it's just going in a straight, beautiful line, and it's like, and the guy's hands are right there and the football's like going right there, and then at the last minute the ball goes and just completely goes the other way for no reason at all. I was like, yeah, there's some cursing going on there. It's just, somebody's just like making sure that their outcome happens the way they want it to. That guy wasn't supposed to catch the ball because then he'd get a touchdown, and then that outcome wouldn't be what they intended. So, people curse to increase their livelihood over somebody else's without having to reveal too much. You might have two vendors who are across the street from each other. One vendor's doing really well. The other vendor's not doing so well. And so one vendor might just curse the other vendor so that his side of the street does better than that one. And sometimes it's fascinating to, there was a very similar curse like that I just unraveled for a client. And I thought, well, this isn't, it was, they were vendors. And I thought, well, this isn't such a big deal. But when you watch that curse, like, from the time that it was laid, like 100 years ago, like through the centuries, and you watch it kind of morph over time and build energy, because they do, and not that it was tended in that way either. This wasn't a tended curse, but just the curse in itself, it can build up energy over time, and it really affects people like hundreds of years later, until someone in the familial line goes, wait a minute, I think there's something here. Can you take a look at it? Is there something that can be undone? And then you go and you find somebody who can undo it. So, usually, unless, so what do? You think you have a curse, then what happens? Unless it's something that you've done yourself. Like, for example, me wishing a flat tire on the guy who cut me off. That's a curse you can undo yourself. You are completely responsible for that curse. You can talk to your allies. And I should tell you all this. You should never put your hands in there and do it yourself. You let your allies, usually angels, archangels, beautiful light beings, do the curse unraveling. And you watch from a safe distance. It's kind of like dealing with radioactive material. You don't, you put on your hazmat suit and you stand a safe distance away, and you watch beautiful light beings do all this beautiful unraveling, and you're like, wow, thank you very much. I'm so glad I was a witness to that. I'm so glad I didn't have to touch any of that. So if anything, I think the most important thing that you should learn from my talk today is don't stick your hands in there. But, if you do curse somebody who's cut you off in traffic, who's cut in front of you in line and made you very upset, talk to your allies, talk to your guides. All of you have angels and archangels that are in your don't like to use your menagerie, but who are in your circle of allies and guides. And, I like to ask them who is the most suited for this work. They'll tell you. They have no qualms with telling you who can handle it. And say, that guy who I wished the flat tire on, I take responsibility for making that curse. And that needs to be unraveled, and, and ask them to undo all of that. So that and like those curses you can take responsibility for and unravel. Other things you should have somebody else take a look at and have them get done. So, another reason that people curse, and this is usually ancestral curses. Why would an ancestor curse their own ancestral line? There's a really fascinating article in the Smithsonian Magazine that came out last week where the Scottish government issued an apology to women that they burned at the stake as witches. So that's changing. Hooray! Actually, I should look up that. I'll see if I can find that before the end of the day, and I'll send you the link. But I was like, wow, in Smithsonian Magazine of all places. So that's one of the reasons that ancestors would curse their ancestral line, because that is great news. Yeah, I agree with you, Rebecca. Because, you might have women who were midwives, women who were skilled in plant medicine, and they're almost always single women. That was the other thing that the magazine article mentioned, is that it was almost always single women who were skilled in the sight, skilled in prophecy, skilled in some kind of spiritual, whatever spiritual path you might pick. And then they would be burned at the stake. And not only would they be burned at the stake, their lands would be usurped, their farm animals would be taken away, anything that they had would be gone. And so if you are a grandmother and you're looking at your grandchildren and one of them is exhibiting particularly gifted skills in whatever, they see spirits, they talk to animals, they are particularly gifted in plant medicine, you're just like, okay, I do not want my grandchild to be burnt at the stake. So I'm going to use all of my skills and my knowledge to help limit their abilities. And so because I don't want them to be noticed, and I don't want them to be persecuted. And so there have been a lot of ancestral curses that I've seen where that's the issue, is that you have somebody in your ancestral line who's trying to protect you, and they're like, well, let's limit their line of vision, let's limit their ability in some way. And so, you come to the 21st century and you have somebody who's trying to take a curse unraveling class and they're always falling asleep, or they're trying to take some other class based in some other kind of spiritual healing, and they've saved up all their money and they're ready to sign up for the class, and the radiator on their car explodes, and now all the money that they've saved up for their class has to be siphoned off and be used for car repair, or the roof of their house caves in or something. And there's just like, every time they try and do something in this way, something else happens, and then they can't do it, and they're like, I keep trying to do this, I feel like I'm called to this, I feel like I would be really good at doing this, but then something happens and then I just can't do it, and I just don't understand why. And then we're like, well, let's take a look if great-great-grandma or great-great-grandpa had something to do with it. And it's not malicious, those, because sometimes we think, oh, all curses are malicious, all curses are terrible, they were done with evil intent. In those cases, they're not done with evil intent. They're done as a means of protection. It's kind of like the grandma who hides her kid in the basement to protect her from the army. It's like the basement is a dark, cold, dank, horrible place, and you might be locked down there for 3 months, which is not ideal. But, your other option is being killed by the army. These are not great options, and she's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to protect you in some way, but now we live in a different time, hopefully, where at least the government is now apologizing to people whose lands they have usurped. And, and actually the woman who worked very hard to get that statute passed is actually working to get a statue put up in Scotland, like a place where people can go and do pilgrimage. So there's like a whole thing going on there. So that's something to look at when you're thinking about ancestral curses. There are some questions, so let me quickly look at these. Do curses build energy from people feeling angry or afraid? Yes, I'm going to get to that. Feeling with their emotion. I will answer that, Wendy Rose. Do curses tend to correlate with individuals who are working to address any remaining martyr victim energy? Oh, I don't know, actually. Do curses tend to correlate with individuals working to... Well, I'll talk about what I'm going to talk about next, and then Wendy Rose, if you don't feel I've answered your question, we can come back to it.
There was also one other, Michael brought up, he said, look at the dollar bill. What is the curse on the dollar bill?
He doesn't want to say now.
Oh. Do you know what it is, Nadia?
It's not a curse. It's it's got an eye and a pyramid and all sorts of stuff on it to bring financial wealth to America.
Oh, so it's more of a spell than a curse.
Yeah, it is. But the whole idea that the government are not aware of curses, just look at your dollar bill. That's what.
Wow. Wow.
Your dollar bill. I'm claiming Irish citizenship.
I don't blame you. I'm ready to move to Ireland myself.
You know, Nadia, one thing I was going to share that as you were talking about all this stuff, that just to confirm everything that you're saying, that when I was a little girl, my dad and stepmom went to New Orleans and brought back as my I went on a trip you didn't come gift. They brought me a little voodoo doll. And I was sitting in bed and I was angry because I didn't get to do something that I thought was perfectly reasonable. And I was looking at the voodoo doll and I was like, well, maybe I should use the voodoo doll because they gave it to me. Like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? And so I looked at all, and it had printed on the body of this red doll all the ailments that you could inflict, and it had pins you were supposed to put in all the different things. And I looked at all these things and I'm like, well, some of these are really terrible. So I picked post-nasal drip. And and I stuck a pin. I was mad at my dad. I stuck post-nasal drip in the doll. And I swear 5 minutes later, he walks into the room to say goodnight. And he's like, oh, my nose has started running all of a sudden. I am not joking. And I was totally freaked out. And I took the pin out of the doll and I never touched it again.
That's one of those instances of people who are innately gifted using their power. And then that's when you curse the guy in front of you and hope he has a flat tire and his tire like explodes in front of you and you're like, oh, well, so sorry. I'm so sorry.
So don't buy your kids those dolls is the moral of my story.
Well, first of all, that's a little bit of cultural appropriation, but that's also like just not knowing the power of things. Puppets are very powerful and they're used in many, many different cultures. And, in Ukraine, they have these dolls called mutanke, which are done with winding thread around, and they're very, very specific. And you use them very carefully for very specific things. Okay, so I want to kind of talk, and hopefully these will answer both of Wendy's questions, and if they don't, we can come back to them. So there are various components of a curse. And when you're unraveling a curse, you have to look for those components. And that's actually the first question that I'll ask when I'm doing what I call a diagnostic is there a curse? And if the guys say, yes, there's a curse, then what we do is we go to what is called the sweet spot, which is where the curse was created. And we look at all of the components of the curse, because a curse has many components. When Wendy asked, do curses build energy from people feeling angry or afraid? Yes, that is one of the components from a curse. A person can take their own emotional energy, like, for example, that example that I used earlier, the wife and the mistress. If the wife was setting the curse herself, she could use that jealous energy and incorporate it as fuel into the curse. She could incorporate anger into the curse. She could incorporate grief over the state of her marriage into that curse. That's just all additional fuel that can be added to help make the curse stronger. So there's that as a fuel. Depending on the gifts and the talents of the curse maker, they can involve the natural elements. So if they make the curse near a river, they could use the energy of the water. There are plenty of, unfortunately, nature beings that get bound up into curses unwillingly because somebody is a particularly gifted curse maker. And so there's tree energy that gets bound in. There's water energy that's been bound in, lightning energy, fire, rain, flood, Like, and if those things are around at the time that the curse is being made, that stuff can get pulled into the curse. That's another possible fuel. You may not know this, but if you witness a curse being done, that you can inadvertently become fuel. And what do I mean by this? Like, one example that my teacher uses is there was a woman in Africa who was cursed, and the curse maker made like this bag, this pouch. And everybody in that village would know, if you had a pouch like that on your doorstep, that's like a curse pouch. And when you see that, you're like, oh boy. And so the curse maker purposefully left this pouch on that woman's doorstep at a time of day when there would be a lot of people walking by. So everybody who walks by and sees that curse, like their energy gets sucked into that curse pouch. That's additional fuel for that curse. Nature beings. Song. If somebody is making the curse, they can sing intention into that curse. Song is super powerful. And so if people start singing songs while they're making the curse, that song energy is an additional fuel. So these are all the things that you're looking as a curse unraveler. These are all the things that you're looking at. So you're like, okay, the song needs to get unraveled. Nature beings need to get unraveled. These people walking by, their energy needs to go back to them. The emotional energy of the curse maker, this needs to get undone. All of this needs to come out. So you're kind of taking inventory of everything that has gone into this curse, because you want to make sure that it's all out of there. Here's where we get a little dark. So there's my disclaimer. You can bind, the unwilling souls of people, beings, animals into curses. So, like sometimes people will sacrifice, when they talk about, we need to sacrifice a chicken. People will kill animals and, take the spirit of that animal, bind it into the curse to make it stronger. Sometimes curse builders will hang around cemeteries and look for the newly deceased. Like, they'll look for the fresh graves. And if you have somebody, and there are people, who don't quite know they're dead. Somebody's in a car accident. They die instantly. And they're like, and we know those stories all the time. They're like, people who are walking around, they're like, I saw my body laying on the ground. These are the souls of spirits who haven't figured out that they've been decapitated in a car accident. They've died instantly, and they're dead, and they haven't realized it. A particularly dark curse maker will say, oh, here's a soul who doesn't know what's going on. I'm going to wrap him up into this curse because that will make it more powerful. And then you kind of have to do a compassionate depossession for that soul because they're tangled up in that curse now too. It's ways of making the curse more powerful, unfortunately. And that also, curse makers will do that so they don't have to use their own life essence. They can use their own life essence into putting the curse. It just depletes them. Why would they do that when they can use somebody else's life essence to put it into the curse? And so, so those are all the things that you look at. So you want to unravel, or, have your guides unravel all of those fuels, and then you kind of go back and check. And my teacher says it's kind of like rewriting history. You go back to that point where before the curse was made, all of those fuels disappear, and then you look and see, now what does it look like? Did we miss anything? Are there any additional fuel? Now that all these other things are cleared out of the way, are there any additional fuels that we missed? Anything else that can get pulled out? And then we go forth and do the healing journey after that. When we do curse unraveling, just so you know, if you come to me for curse unraveling, you don't get to hear all the dark, dirty details of the curse, because that's not the part that we want you to hold on to. Like, because after all of that is done, we'll go back and do a healing journey. And that's when beautiful things happen. Like, in Norse mythology, there are these beings known as the Norns. Three of the most famous ones are Urda, Verdande, and Skold. Urda spins the thread of life, Verdande weaves the tapestry of life, and Skold cuts the thread of life when it's done. And so what I often see sometimes in the healing journey is that these three will go through your tapestry of life and like cut out the parts that the curse affected and like reweave new things into your life. that have changed, not that the curse is no longer a part of your life. I see choirs of angels singing healing into you and your ancestral line if it's an ancestral curse. Sometimes in healing journeys I'll see, like, let's say it's the grandmother who laid a curse to limit the channeling abilities of her line so that they don't get persecuted. Sometimes that ancestor will show up and just be relieved that they're a member of their ancestral line now lives in a time where they can actually work on their channeling abilities and work on honing their skills and being able to do that without having a bunch of people with pitchforks and flaming torches show up at their door and threaten to burn down their house. So, a lot of beautiful things happen in these healing journeys. And those are the things that we share with the client because, we don't want the client going, oh my God, I had this worst curse ever. I mean, my ancestor did this and then they killed this chicken and they put all this in this curse and it was gooey and sticky and, and then, because that's a great story. That's great TV. And that story gets repeated over and over and over again. And then it's like that curse still gets to live on with you retelling that story. So we don't tell the details of the curse. Sometimes people get disappointed. They're like, oh, I wanted to know. And you're like, no. We'll tell them the story of the healing journey because the story we want you to repeat is, oh, there was a choir of angels singing healing into my body. And, oh, Archangel Haniel showed up and he put this beautiful rose quartz into my heart chakra. And then there was more singing and there was healing. And then these beautiful Norns came and they rewove my ancestral line so that, like, this curse never even existed. Those are the things that we want you repeating over and over and over again because that's the stuff that we want integrated into your new life. Not the fact that, 400 years ago somebody was jealous of your great-great-grandmother and put a curse on them. That's the thing that, we don't want you to hold on to that. Let's see. Okay, so this is curse is a breakage of natural law. We should be able to not be victims to this. Are folks that are not attuned more easily cursed? Boy, yes. Curses are, possessions are also a break of natural law, a break of sovereignty, but that doesn't mean that they don't happen on a regular basis. Yeah, they do happen. I'd love to say that you could be attuned to not be cursed. There are ways that you can protect yourself. Like I've gotten to the point where you can, for example, like before we started class today, I asked the angels to create a sphere around all of us today of protection, truth, and light, so that if there was like any being who heard us talking about curses and got a little too interested or attracted some other entities or energies who are like, hey, they're talking about curses, let's see what we can get into, like they just end up running into a sentinel angel instead of running into us. That's a form of protection. I do that kind of stuff all the time. If that doesn't work, which I'm good, I'm not Archangel Michael, like he's better. Like if I still feel something coming, I will set up protections, like if I feel like, sometimes I might feel something and I'll just grab it and I'll hand it over to the angels and go, I need you to take care of that. I don't need this right now. Or I'll say, any energy, any negative energy that comes my way that is intending to do me harm, I ask that, and I'll name whoever, whether it's Archangel Michael, Archangel Uriel, whoever, that they deflect this energy and use it to clean the Great Lakes, or to help restore this forest, or to help this field that is getting cleaned up from nuclear waste. Like that energy gets deflected away from me and then it gets transformed into something that's useful. Some people use it for themselves, like they'll say, any of this negative energy, I want it to reinforce my shield of sovereignty. I don't like it to be attached to me, so I don't tend to do that. I like it to be deflected and sent someplace else for the betterment of others. So I do that as a form of protection because, it is an infringement on my sovereignty. But sometimes those things don't work. Sometimes there's an especially crafty curse maker who's got it out for me. And then I just go to somebody in my circle of friends and say, I got slimed. I need your help. And that's why we have a circle of knowledgeable individuals who can help us in these situations, because, you know, we have defenses up, but every now and then something will penetrate those defenses. So yeah, you're right. It is against the natural law, but unfortunately, sometimes those laws can still be broken. What are the signs and symptoms of being cursed? How do these people find their way to you? Well, I mentioned some of them, like, for example, let's say you want to take Michael's dream interpretation class, and you feel like this is what you're meant to do. You're really fascinated by it. But every time you go to sign up for it, something happens. Somebody in your family dies, your car breaks down. You know, when you had the money for it, then all of a sudden you have to divert the money to do something else. Or you do sign up to take the class and you keep falling asleep. Not that Michael isn't a brilliant teacher and very interesting to listen to, but you're sitting there in class and you're just like, I just can't keep my eyes open. Like something is making me fall asleep. And it's not that you're in Australia and you're taking it at 3:00 in the morning, which God love you Australians for being able to do that. I don't know how you did it. You know, but you know, it's like noon in your time and you should be awake and bright and vibrant, and or you know the class is happening and you can't sleep the night before, so like you just, something is keeping you up so that when you do get to Michael's class you just cannot focus. Those would be indicators. Or you sign up for a curse unraveling and I'll say, great, I'll see you on, you know, Wednesday the 18th at 3:00. Wednesday the 18th at 3:00 shows up and you're not there. And I'm like, okay, what happened? And you're like, oh, it was Wednesday the 18th? I wrote down on my calendar that it was Thursday the 19th. How did that happen? Like, those are all like, and I'm usually very forgiving with those kinds of things because it's usually not you that's making you forget when your appointment was, or any of those kinds of things. Curses can also show up in your dreams. Usually entities show up as somebody invading your house. I don't remember what curses look like, but Michael did a show about that. So take a look in his archive and you can, hopefully that was helpful. Let's see. Shannon says, my husband and I have been working on clearing a very in-depth financial curse from the 1400s from a past life with the same children we have in this life. We've had a clearing done. How would we best to ensure that it's clear for the adult kids moving forward? You can have somebody take a look at it. Write down your dreams and see if your dreams tell you. Ask, you know, if you're in good contact with your guides. You know, I talk with my guides a lot about things. Well, that's how I get information about people who come to me. You know, I'll just ask, like, you know, is there a curse? Is there this? Is there that? And if you're on a good level of channeling information from your guides can tell you whether or not that has been cleared. Any difference from ancestral generational curses to past life? And those are kind of the same thing. Ancestral generational curses and past life lineage curses. They're kind of, we kind of deal with them in the same way because we have to look back, do like a little bit of time traveling. Like my teacher likes to say, we're going to do a little time traveling and look back in time and see what from that back there is causing this now. The question I usually tend to ask is, what was, what is becoming, and what must be. And so you're kind of looking at this range of what's happening there. Jen likes the transmutation and deflected energy into positive forces. Yeah, I find that to be really helpful. I don't like to hold on to that energy. Plus, I find it a way of saying, okay, you know, keep it coming. You don't like what I'm doing, you're going to keep sending this stuff this way. The Great Lakes are loving it. They're, you know, the zebra mussels are getting cleaned up out of the Great Lakes because of all of your negative energy. Thank you. You know, or this forest is really getting cleaned up, or this is getting shifted because you don't like me that much, but that's great. What if you always fall asleep during healing meditation? Oh, Camille, I love that question. You know, when I first started on this path and I first learned how to journey, I think my first, if I'm being honest, double digits journeys were falling asleep. I'm not gonna lie to you, especially when they happen like after lunch. You know, like some journeys you just fall asleep, and it happens too. I'm sorry to say this, Michael. It happens too with cutting the ties. You know, you do that cutting the ties meditation, and you're like, I'm not gonna fall asleep this time. I'm not gonna fall asleep, and you're like, ugh, and you fall asleep. I've Actually, what I'll do is I'll set my intention before I do that. If I'm going to go into a meditation and I say, you know, and if for some reason I fall asleep, you know, I ask that in my unconscious state, whatever healing needs to be done will be done, and trust that it will be done. But then you can also ask that unconscious state be shortened more and more each time. Like, you know, if I'm going to be sleeping for 10 minutes this time, next time can it be 9? And, you know, this time can it be 8? So that you can kind of wean yourself off of that sleeping time. Or you can also, like, ask the question, like, be curious, like, is it always during healing meditation? Are there other meditations that you are awake for? Or is it just when you get to healing meditation that you fall asleep? If that's the case, then that's something else to look into. Like, what is it about healing meditation that makes you go unconscious? Because there's probably a little something in there that might have to be undone. April says, I've literally seen a woman throwing a curse on the dreamer during a back and forth fight between them in the dream. Yeah, I've never seen this happen, but I've heard stories of, like, you know, like, I don't want to necessarily call them medicine people, but, you know, in the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine and Romania and Transylvania, there are these characters, the male versions are called Mulfare, who are also purported to be able to control the weather. I forget what, there's a female name for them, but I usually hear more about the male ones, who are very well known for just, like, flinging curses at each other. And, you know, you think of, like, I think the American version might be the Hatfields and the McCoys, which are, like, this well-known feuding family who lived in the mountains of the Appalachians. Like, I'm sure there were plenty, because, you know, the Appalachians are also known for their conjure women. I'm sure there was plenty of cursing that happened between those two families. So there's just a lot of, and don't think that it just happens in your conscious state. I'm sure that it happens in your unconscious state too, unfortunately. Oh, there's a question for Michael. What if you rarely dream? Is that a sign of a curse? Actually, I kind of want to defer to Michael Sheridan, but for those people who always say that they rarely dream, Michael has great things for remembering your dreams in his book. The one that worked the most for me when I said that I rarely dreamt, which is really not true because he's interpreted hundreds of my dreams, is The Glass of Water by the Bedside. And if you don't know that one, it's where you fill up a glass of water with the intention of remembering your dreams, and you drink like half of it before you go to bed and leave the other half of your glass next to the bed with the intention of you remembering your dreams, and then you wake up in the morning, you drink the other. And I almost feel like that glass of water, like, absorbs all of my dreams at night. At least that's how I thought. Whether or not that was what was intended, that's how I always felt it was. And then I, drink the rest of the water in the morning, and then I would remember all kinds of fascinating things. So if you've tried that and that doesn't help you, there's another thing about that, setting your alarm and then, like, being, like, half awake and then, like, hitting the snooze button or something. There's something like that too that is, I can't remember, but that's in the book. But that one didn't work for me as well because I usually ended up falling back asleep. Camille further answered her question. It's usually during healing meditation, but you've also fallen asleep as a participant. We should probably take a look at that because there might be something about healing. You might have had a persecuted healer in your line that's trying to protect you from something. That would be my first guess without, like, being on the spot and doing a full diagnostic in front of an entire group of people, and, like, totally airing your laundry on Wisdom Soup, which I wouldn't want to do for you. But, you know me. You can, talk to me. And Let me know what you think. Yeah, so just trying to think if there's anything else in here. One thing that I wanted to say, because I love this this quote from, no, I'm not going to air her laundry. No. That's so unfair to her. Somebody mentioned earlier about this being against natural law for curses. Yeah, it really is. But, sovereignty is a universal right that we all have. But it's something that we need to work on maintaining. It's a universal right, but it's not a gift. So when I first heard that the first time, I almost fell on the floor and started crying because I thought, oh, that's not fair. Because it's true, but it's absolutely true. And if you think about it that way, and it's not that you have to be like, you don't have to live in a shield of armor, because that makes you kind of hardened. It's not about that at all. It's just, know your boundaries, know who your allies are, know who you can call on when you need help, and, know what you can do when you feel something and you're just like, oh no, that's not me. Oh no, that's not something that I want. And then hand it off to the appropriate person. Like, I don't deal with that negative energy. I let the appropriate people deal with that. Oh, also very important, vetting. I don't think we talk about vetting enough. Like, let's say your teacher will say, we're going to go on a journey and we're going to have a meditation. We're going to find an ally for channeling or whatever. And then we'll go into a meditation or we'll go on a journey. And when I say go on a journey, that usually means you rattle. Now I sing more for journeys. And you kind of go into a meditative state. And, you meet somebody along the way. And then somebody shows up and says, hey, I'm your ally. And you think, great, this person's fantastic. You have every right as a sovereign individual to go to an ally that you deeply, deeply trust and you already have a relationship with and go, is this really the best ally for me for this work that I'm intending to do? So let's say you're looking for an ally to help you with your channeling, and you go and somebody shows up and says, hey, I'm an ally here for your channeling. Then go to an ally that you regularly channel with and that you have a deep relationship with and go, is this person, deity, angel, whoever, showed up really the best ally for me? And vet them. You're allowed to do that. As a sovereign human being, you have every right to check them out and go, and have them say, yeah, they're really good. They know what they're doing. You can trust this one. This one's good for you. And why do I say this? Because there are many trickster allies out there, and their work is fantastic and wonderful and important. Can I share? Am I allowed to share? Yeah, I can share this story. So, the guidance was, we need to go on a journey. We're going to find an ally who's going to help us with psychopomp work. And psychopomp work is helping souls transition. Like, okay, great. So I go on this journey. And the first deity who shows up is Loki, who is a trickster god. If you're not familiar with the Norse mythology, most people know Loki because of the Marvel movies. So Loki shows up and he's like, hey, I'm here to help you with psychopomp work. And I know Loki is a trickster god. So I look at another deity that I do a lot of psychopomp work, and I look at them and I go, is this for real? Like, is really Loki the best one who can help me with this work right now? And the psychopomp ally was like, no. And I look at Loki and I'm like, really? And Loki was like, well, I just wanted, and I'm just kidding. No, it's not me, and he walks away, and then I, move forward, and I do find the appropriate one. But, and you're not always going to find a trickster god, but you don't always have to take the first person that crosses your path. And, we don't always ask for help, which is one of our downfalls as humans. And this kind of circles back to the sovereignty thing. if you're working with a lot of angelic beings, angels, archangels, sentinel angels, any of those angelic beings, cherubim, seraphim, they are very intent. They know sovereignty very, very well. They're very intent on maintaining sovereignty, and they will sit and watch you fail 1,000,000 times because you have not asked for help. They're not just going to jump in. And they're like, wow, I could really help Nadia out right now, but she hasn't said, Archangel Michael, could you really help me out with this? I need your help. So I'm just going to sit and watch and see what happens. Wow, she really face planted on that one. Okay, let's see if she learned from her mistake and see if she asks for help this time. No, she didn't ask for help again. Huh, okay. And then, maybe after the 100,000th time of me completely failing on something, and I'm like, wow, Archangel Michael, do you think you could help me out on this? And he's like, yes, finally, she asked. Hallelujah, I can be of service. So, until we ask for help, they're just going to sit there and watch and wait for us to ask, which is sometimes really frustrating. You're like, you see, I'm struggling here. Can't you just jump in? They're like, no. But I think that's also a very important thing to remember, because it's not that it makes us humble. There's something, I don't know, there's something inherently beautiful about reaching out your hand to an angelic being who is all-knowing, ridiculously powerful, and just saying, I would really appreciate your help right now in this situation. And of course, the other frustrating thing is it might not be the help that you think that you need, but it's absolutely the help that you need, because they know and they see 7 million miles down the road of exactly the help that you need in that particular moment. And they help because you've asked. And Lewis, I don't know if I understand when you say I deal with that very differently than you do, but if you want to elaborate, you can. And if you don't, that's okay too. So are we going to 11 or 11:30, Anne? I just want to be mindful of time.
We usually wrap up at around right around now, but
Okay.
if you have more to say, please say it, because I know everybody's interested, but we usually go an hour.
No, I want to be mindful of people's time, especially if everybody's in different time zones. There was just a couple of things that I'm going to stick in the chat.
And people would love to know. I know Camille was asking how to reach you.
Yes.
She was wanting to book a session, I think.
Yep. So there's my website, and you can send me an email. I will warn you that I'm going to be away for part of May, so I'm booking late in May. So if you're looking to do stuff, you're not going to see me tomorrow. So
can I ask, Nadia, how often, if somebody, what if somebody, if for every person who books a session with you, can you find curses on everyone, or does the rare person have a curse?
It's not always a curse, and I always trust my guides. Someone might have a curse, but they'll say it's more important for you to do this right now. They triage it for me. They'll say, well, there's this and this, but this is more important right now, so this is what you should be working on. And I always trust them because, I don't know. And I'm always the first one to say I have no idea what's going on. My guides know everything, and I trust them implicitly because I've built relationship with them. The guides that I work with are not like somebody that I just met yesterday, and these are people that I've built. People, deities, beings, entities, whatever you want to call them. I call them people because I kind of view them that way at this point. We've built relationship and have worked together for years in these arenas. And so if they say, yeah, there's a curse there, but you're not going to get that curse to budge until you do this first. Mm-hmm. And so I go, well, okay, we're going to do this first because, what's the point? Because then you're chipping away at something that's not going to move. You're wasting time. Yeah. So I always trust them. I will be assisting. I'm not teaching, but I will be assisting a class on spiritual hygiene. My teacher, Betsy, is teaching a class on spiritual hygiene on, it's coming up, April 23rd. And she's actually doing a whole series. If you can't do it on April 23rd, I know she's planning on making that class available afterwards, so that like you can watch it, like if you live in Australia and that's really inconvenient to watch it at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, you can watch it whenever is good for you. And she's doing like a whole series. There's like a series on talismans. She'll be doing a curse unraveling class, which I'll also be assisting in the fall. I think it's in September. That one will be going up soon. So there's that. But besides curse unraveling, there's this thing that I do called compassionate depossession. And I know the minute you hear the word depossession, everybody's going to scream. Nobody vomits split pea soup. No beds levitate. No furniture flies around, because there are no phenomena allowed within the sphere of truth, compassion, and light. But, if you do have an entity that attaches to you, for example, today I worked with a client, and then, I'm allowed to share this, that there was a nature being, a tree spirit, that attached to this client because it was a safe place for them. The forest that they lived in was being decimated, and they needed a place to stay, and this particular person was a great place to stay, and that's where they ended up. They were not trying to, take over this person, do anything mischievous or horrible. They just needed a safe place to stay, and this person was a safe place to stay. But we needed to find a better place for them, because a tree spirit inside of a human body is cramped and uncomfortable and not where they're supposed to be. And so it's like we had to find them the right place, and then we had to, make the client sovereign. And there was no screaming, there was no, I'm the devil, there was none of that. It was just, okay, you go there, she goes there, let's clean everything up, and this is all good. That's usually what happens in a depossession. So it's really, I just want to assure people that it's usually not very scary. That could be a different wisdom soup we can talk about.
Moving furniture would be so fun.
And some people try and make phenomena happen, and we work very hard to keep it under wraps, because it's it could be an option, but it's less fun than you think it is. Usually stuff disappears a lot. I've had all kinds of stuff, like it's usually jewelry. Like jewelry will disappear, and then it ends up appearing in a place where I know it's not like an earring will disappear and it'll show up in the laundry room, like in a place like on a high shelf in the laundry. It's like, okay, that's just, and you have every right to say this isn't like, if you have fairies are probably another topic for another wisdom soup. If you have, brownies, fairies, elves and things like that who are disturbing your home, you have every right to say, how can we be in right relationships so that you're not disturbing my sleep at 3:00 in the morning? Let's work something out. and work something out with them, because, I do that in every hotel room that I go to, because, spirits, especially in hotels, they love it when you have people that they can talk to. And so they'll want to talk to you all night, and you'll say, no, I'm sorry, between like midnight and 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., whenever, I'm not talking to anybody. I'll be happy to talk to you when I get up, over breakfast, or at this time or whatever, but I need a good night's sleep in order to do what I need to do. And so, business hours are closed, and I'll talk to you later. And that's, and then, I also ask, my guardian angels to make sure that happens, so you don't get bothered at all hours of the night.
And Michael is asking, so people would like to have a curse unraveling session. What is the name of your website where they can book, and what do you charge for a session?
The name of the website is, it's at Sacred Compassion. And right now I'm booking, you have to send me an email, because I keep very close control over my schedule. So it's not like you can just click on a time.
Okay.
And you have to fill out an intake form, because I asked, there's only like 10 questions on it, and like one of them is your name, one of them is, your time zone. Like, these are really easy questions. So like, don't be afraid of my intake form. I do For an hour. If a curse unraveling takes only an hour, it's 75. If it takes an hour and a half, it's 100. If it's more involved and I need another practitioner, then we'll talk about other rates because. But we won't know if it's more involved until we do a diagnostic. So, but it's usually 75 to 100.
That's great.
And then to your question, Adriana, is there a difference between attachment and possession? Absolutely. I would say what I did earlier today for somebody was more of an attachment. That tree being was just looking for a safe place to be. He was just attached to this person. He wasn't influencing the kind of clothes that she bought, what kind of food she ate, any of that. He was just looking for a safe place to stay. If anything, like she felt a tingling in her legs, but it wasn't affecting the way she walked. Like she felt that there was something there, but it wasn't affecting her behavior. Possession affects your behavior more. One example might be, let's say there's a car accident, the person doesn't know they're dead and they're a smoker, and you drive by that car accident, they, attach onto you, and all of a sudden you start smoking and you've never smoked before in your life. That's more of a possession because it starts affecting your behavior and you start craving cigarettes and you're like, I've never smoked. Why? Or you go to the store and you buy pistachio ice cream. You've never bought pistachio ice cream before, and suddenly you're craving pistachio ice cream. You don't know why, but you just are. When your behavior starts being affected. And then usually sometimes after we do the depossession, people open their closets and go, why did I buy this shirt? And you're like, you probably didn't buy that shirt. Somebody else did. And that's when it's more of a possessing being. That's usually the difference between those two. Again, usually they're not malicious. Sometimes it's family members who attach onto you because you happen to be at their funeral and they still haven't figured stuff out, or family members who have trouble letting go of family members. Jackie and I will one day, we've talked about having a class about death, which I know sounds scary. But one of the nicest things that you can do for people who are passing is let them know that they did a good job, they have nothing to be ashamed of, and that they can pass peacefully. Because one of the things that happen most often when people are transitioning is there's something that's happened in their life that they're ashamed of, and they feel like they need to stick around to try and fix it. And you can just tell them, no, you did great. I love you. It's wonderful. Find the next great adventure. You don't have to stay here for me. And then let them pass peacefully. Because it's those people who are like, oh, Grandma, we need you here. Grandma's 95. You don't need Grandma here. Let her pass peacefully. But, that's completely another class. And, I don't want to sound like I'm being harsh about it. But there are so many beings who are suffering because they have a family who doesn't know how to let them go and transition easily. And death is also something that we don't talk about in our culture very much, which deserves, it's where we're headed. Unfortunately, it's where we're headed from the day that we're born. And, I don't want to feel like I want to end there, but,
Well,
it's kind of where we are.
Thank you so much, Nadia. It's been an awesome presentation. I think everybody is thrilled with everything that you share with us today. So thank you so much. I think Dawn has some pistachio ice cream to get to. So thank you guys so much. We will be back again next month, second Thursday of the month, always. I will be sending out announcements and posting as we get closer to the date. But thank you again, Nadia. I really appreciate you being willing to come and share this with us. Totally fascinating subject. And I think everyone resonated with at least parts and many of us with lots of what you have said. So thank you so much. And
thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. And these comments are beautiful. I'm reading all the love. So thank you for all the love.
Yeah. Fantastic job. Fantastic job. And if you have a voodoo doll, throw it out. And
or thank it for its service, and find a good way for it to
end its
to move it on.
There you go. All right, thanks you guys. I'll see you guys next month. Happy Wisdom Soup Night. Bye you guys.